Anyhow, I'm back. Um, so this idea of what you feed will grow. Um, and right now, I mean, the thought of like feeding the desire for a new watch just seems absurd because, again, it's finding a balance. I think this is sort of the human task of our era, or one of them, which is like how to relate with our creations, our technologies. How do we do this? Because for the vast majority of human history, if we say that anatomically modern humans arose around 200,000 years ago, for the vast majority of that, we've lived in a simpler hunter-gatherer existence. Now, we've had tools the whole time. Tools go back, I think the latest is 3.4 million years. But they were very simple, and they were very much part of the environment, rocks and bones and so forth. And things started to shift rapidly around 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, when the Younger Dryas ended. That was for those not familiar with that, with prehistory, the Younger Dryas was a period of about 1,000 years, a little bit more, after the Ice Age. It was getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Look at this. Clear cutting in the middle of this beautiful forest. I think they do this to preserve the land. They periodically cut parts of it. It's kind of ironic. Anyways, the last Ice Age, it was warming up quickly. And then they've taken cores of, I guess the temperatures, I don't know how they do this, but I think they've done this in Greenland. And they can tell what was the global temperature through the ice. And anyways, it got really, really cold for about 1,200 years. And we call this the Younger Dryas. It's almost like, it's kind of like that, you're coming out of winter and you have that one last terrible snowstorm, like in March or early April. And then it quickly goes away. And it's spring. So that was the Younger Dryas. And after that, this is very still much debated. I mean, not necessarily in the mainstream academia, but we're making up a story about our past based upon not a huge amount of evidence. Anyways, so what's that? Oh, nothing. I thought it was a bear or a dragon. So the Younger Dryas ended, and after that, you see this flourishing of agriculture. It just kind of like almost randomly happened, and some people attribute it to that. The ice retreated and melted quickly. There was more land, population exploded, people started staying put. This is also when the first known temple of Göbekli Tepe was built. This was just discovered not long ago, I think in the 90s. It's a really fascinating site. So this agriculture, we're talking 12,000 years ago. 10% of the existence of anatomically modern human beings. And since then, and then it jumped forward again around 5,000 years ago. And that's when the great urban civilizations, 6,000 years ago, Sumer in Egypt, the Indus Valley. So we have these moments, these points in our history where we take these steps forward. And one of the largest, arguably the largest, was 12,000 years ago. And from that point, there's a huge one 6,000 years ago. Another huge one 500 years ago with the modern age, the globalization, right? The Renaissance and the age of exploration. And then around 200 years ago, with the Industrial Revolution. And then 70 years ago with the atomic age, followed by the computer age. And then 20 years ago, the internet. So we've had these, and it just, our technological capacity it's this crazy story, you know? It's amazing. We're totally amazing. But there's this question of how do we do it, right? Clearly, you know, the atomic age starts and the United States uses atomic weapons and kills tons of people. And clearly that's not the way to do it, right? Clearly we don't want to use that power in that way. The internet, how many hours do we spend zoned out? Think of all the information technologies. Young people, under 20, are totally addicted to their phones. Not all of them, of course, but a large number of them. Video games, etc. So we develop these new technologies, and then there's this instant misuse of them. And there's industries that pop up that feed upon the addictiveness. So yeah, and it's not so simple. I don't think it can be attributed to a simple answer, like you gotta just pull yourself. I mean, there's the kind of macho masculine approach, just like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just be a man, right? There's some truth in that, but it's not the whole truth. Let's go walk out here and take a look. Come on, Willa, let's take a look. There's this is just weird. It's like a wasteland. There's more psychological perspectives. There's quote-unquote spiritual perspectives. I mean, I think it goes back. I guess I take a somewhat Buddhist approach where it has a lot to do with just our relationship with the mind. That the mind, in a way, is the source of all these technologies. And it's also like our first and foremost technology. I mean, I think that's where we became human, is with the development of conceptual thought. And from that, art and language. Right? This dog here is not an intellectual, conceptual being. She's a feeling being, and she thinks in her own way. I don't think she thinks with language. She understands the word walk, right? But it's very rudimentary. And she lives more in a world of senses and feeling. And we have our minds. And so it has to do with relating with the mind, relating with our own internal creations. Because no matter what is created out there, we create our response. Now, of course, it's not intentional necessarily. You know, we have to start with looking at, well, what are our habitual responses? You know, what are, you know, in psychology they talk about our defenses, right? How do we automatically react? Right? We all have this. We all react. Somebody slights us and we react. We clench up. Or the opposite, we're drawn, we're attracted. It's the pornography effect. Pornography is people are either drawn to it or repulsed by it. It's one or the other. It's not, oh, that is what it is. Right? So, I think most fundamentally, yes, it's this relationship with the mind, with the objects of consciousness. And that's what consumerism is about. It's about trying to feed certain tendencies of the mind, that more addictive pornographic effect, that drawing to these objects. And the Buddhist approach is that nothing will satisfy. Nothing will, because it's like trying to fill a space that is infinite. Come on, Willa. Keep on going. Trying to fill a space that's you can't no object. I mean that's really what it's like, from this perspective. There's this infinite, undefinable vastness that is the nature of consciousness, and that is who we are. And all of the experiences, all of the items, the goods, the watches, the sex and drugs and rock and roll, the luxury items, the achievements even, the status, all of this, it can't fill it, right? It's like throwing stuff up into space, trying to make it filled. So the Buddhist approach is first of all recognizing, in a way, first and foremost, recognizing how we do this, how we basically are insane. Because it is a kind of insanity, trying to fill something that's infinite. There is another approach that I also find equally appealing and true, and that is what I would call the creative approach. And that is that we are, by our nature, creative beings. That let's check this out, Willa. It's beautiful in a way, isn't it? This landscape. I'm sorry that the camera is just shaking so much. Oh, there's a deer. Willa, stop. I don't even think she noticed. So the creative approach, which is that we are, by our nature, creative beings. We wish to create. We wish to, I think this relates, actually what I'm talking about are the two higher needs of Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow has his lower needs, the survival needs, safety, subsistence, and then more emotional belonging needs for relationship, friendship, connection with others. And then the self-esteem needs, which are often related to achievement, personal achievement, status, ego. And the vast majority of people are kind of cycling through those. And if you don't, and the thing is if you don't kind of meet a need, it's always going to be there, no matter how developed, no matter what your life is. So if you're always in survival mode, it's really hard to care about self-esteem, right? This is why poor people can beg, right? Because they need to survive, or they need their drug, which is often the case with homeless people. But Maslow said that there's actually higher needs. Those are what he calls the subsistence needs, the lower needs, the basic needs that are like all human beings have to some degree or another. But the higher needs are what he called self-actualization needs. And then later on, he added in self-transcendence. And self-actualization is the need to fulfill one's unique potentials. This isn't the same thing as the self-esteem needs. Although oftentimes the self-actualization needs get blocked and distorted by self-esteem needs. This is like, for instance, the artist who does art and it gets confused because he cares too much what other people think. That caring what other people think is the self-esteem, right? This is the, if you care what other people think about your watch, that's related to self-esteem, generally. But self-actualization is more of one's own path, one's own unique potential. The idea that we're all born unique and we all have our own unique potentials. And these aren't necessarily, it's easy to get trapped in the idea that unique potentials means huge, I'm going to go this way, huge monumental gifts and talents that need to be brought into the world, like carving the new Pietà, right? But it could be simply, the nobility of serving others as a deli clerk. Maybe that's one's potential. Maybe that's one. Maybe one. We all know this. We all have had this experience where we've gone to a store, and maybe we've derided the workers there, and then there's one person that's maybe older, maybe been there for a while, and they're just so kind and full of life and joy, and they just change everyone's day that they encounter. How noble is that? Now, of course, it really depends upon the individual. That wouldn't work for me, right? Like I have other potentials and interests that I feel like I need to actualize in this life, which is a whole nother topic. But the self-actualization, it's not the same thing. It's not necessary. If you're lucky, you can align it with your line of work. If you're lucky and you're clever about it. But it doesn't always work that way, It works that way or it doesn't work that way often for a while. And so we have to find lines of work that either make us money or just support us so that we can do this. But Maslow is very clear that if you avoid this, if you avoid your self-actualization, you'll have an underlying misery for the rest of your life. So for him, it was most important to connect with that. The psychologist James Hillman talks about it as the acorn, that we all have a unique acorn within us that wants to develop into an oak. So self-transcendence is more what I was talking about with the Buddhist, is transcending the whole rigmarole and attaining a kind of unity or oneness with the totality. Transcending the individual body-mind, or that identity, and experiencing oneself as part of, and not just part of, but the whole shebang, a unique expression of the totality. So I find it distressing. Well, it's not totally distressing. It's part of this development. I was working with a student a couple years ago. And I asked him the question. He had a lot of issues around feeling pushed to achieve. He had he was from a wealthy family, and it was all about being in the mold of the family, the grandparents in particular. And he struggled with that, and that a lot of people, especially from more high-achieving families, struggle with that. And it obfuscates maybe what their natural interests are. So I asked him, would you rather find a career that you didn't like but made you $300,000 a year? Or would you rather find a career that you loved but you only made $50,000 a year? And he, without much hesitation, said the $300,000. And now, of course, it isn't either or, really. Sometimes you can do both. But I think the underlying question I was asking him is, what's more important to you, financial gain and wealth, or wealth of soul, right? Wealth of soul. And for whatever reason, he picked financial gain. He wanted that more, perhaps to please his family. But I think also he had some ideas about, well, if I make more money, I can help more. I can do some of the things that really matter to me. And that's part of, actually, that's an aspect of the consumerist dream, which is what the golden years, the golden nest egg. Like, I will work my ass off and then retire at 65 and live off my nest egg. And sometimes that doesn't that rarely makes people happy. You know what I mean? That it's sort of like it's sacrificing such a huge percentage of your life for this late period, and sometimes people get sick. So yeah, this could be endless. You know, there's all these little details that we could work out, and it's not so black and white. Some people can work really hard and do what they love, or they can work really hard but take enough time to enjoy it while they're at it. Or some people, this is why some people develop hobbies, because they can find some fulfillment through that they don't get through their work life or their family life. And actually, some people that do what they love for a living sometimes say they wish they hadn't, because when you start involving money, it just changes it, right? So I'm probably gonna tie this off so I can enjoy the last part of this walk. I'm actually going way too slow. But yeah, I'll just leave it there. All right, later. And they can tell what was the global temperature through the ice. And anyways, it got really, really cold for about 1,200 years. And we call this the Younger Dryas. So it's almost like it's kind of like that, you know, you're coming out of winter and you have that one last terrible snowstorm, like in March or early April. And then it quickly goes away. And it's spring. So that was the Younger Dryas. And after that, you know, all this is they were very simple, and they were very much part of the environment, you know, rocks and bones and so forth. And things started to shift rapidly around 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, when the Younger Dryas ended. That was for those not familiar with that, with prehistory, the Younger Dryas was a period of about 1,000 years, a little bit more, after the Ice Age. Anyhow, I'm back. This idea of what you feed will grow. And right now, I mean, the thought of like feeding the desire for a new watch just seems absurd. Because, again, it's finding a balance. You know, I think this is sort of the human task of our era, or one of them, which is like how to relate. It's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Look at this. Clear cutting in the middle of this beautiful forest. I think they do this to preserve the land. They periodically cut parts of it. It's kind of ironic. Anyways, the last ice age, it was warming up quickly. And then they've taken cores of, I guess the temperatures, I don't know how they do this, but I think they've done this in Greenland with our creations, our technologies. How do we do this? Because for the vast majority of human history, you know, if we say that anatomically modern humans arose around 200,000 years ago, for the vast majority of that, we've lived in a simpler hunter-gatherer existence. Now, we've had tools the whole time. Tools go back, I think the latest is 3.4 million years.